Okay, thank you. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Chair Lipcott Hayes,
Here.
Councilmember Burt,
Here.
Councilmember Board Member Collins.
Present.
Board Member Delrock is absent. We have a quorum of 3 present. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we also please just go around and have the staff present introduce themselves and their roles?
Yes, I'm Vin Nguyen. I'm the clerk for this board.
I'm Alice Shambayati. I'm the admin assisting Vin today.
Ed Shikana, fellow city manager.
Chantel Cotton Gaines, deputy city manager. Lana Conway, assistant superintendent, filling in for Don Austin.
Wonderful. Okay, so this is the regular meeting of the City Schools Liaison Committee, April 20th, 2023. And let's turn now to public comments on anything not on the agenda.
Thank you.
Turn on the microphone.
I'll turn it on. Okay. We'll take 3 minutes. I'll be brief.
You want to sit down so you can like access the mic?
Okay.
I'm not that mic isn't closer to you. Oh, there you go.
Thank you. Ken Horowitz, longtime resident, and just want to thank the school board for the letter that they presented last meeting. School board is a very powerful voice in our community, and getting a letter from them is really encouraging for those of us that want to keep the Coverly vision present. As you're probably aware of, both in the Daily Post and the Weekly, right after the meeting, there were articles about the school district revised talks on Coverly. So I'm very hopeful, and the city manager mentioned at the city council meeting on Monday night that May 22nd or beyond, which probably means beyond, the city council will be taking up discussion of Coverly. And at the meeting on Monday night, they approved the construction of the History Museum. And I wanted to make a public comment and sort of ask the city manager, based on the track record of approving the History Museum, what does he think the track record will be on the approval of a Coverly construction project? And how many decades would that take? But, and maybe I should have corrected myself and said that rather than talk about decades, how about centuries? Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it. Are there any other public comments, Clerk?
Chair, there's no other requests to speak.
Okay, terrific. Let's move on to an approval of the minutes from last month's meeting.
So moved. Second.
All in favor of approving the minutes? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any
Um,
opposed? Okay,
Sorry.
go ahead.
I just, I think my mic is good now. Okay, good. I was informed by, city staff today, responding to my request, that it is not there's no requirement, nor is it custom in other, city committees to approve the minutes. And so I suggest, well, certainly we can continue to approve minutes in this committee if we want, that we dispense with that requirement, which I imagine might help the minutes get posted faster, which would probably be more of service to the community than our pro forma approval. So just a suggestion for future practice.
I appreciate that. I actually asked at the last meeting if we could develop a set of minutes that were a little bit more substantive than the recitation of the agenda items. And we do have that in our information packet at the end. I think that's helpful for the public to see. Certainly getting the minutes out to the public in a more timely fashion is of interest to all. So yeah, I'll ask staff for guidance on how long it's taking for the minutes to get posted and what this committee does versus other committees. So thank you for the suggestion. What I want to turn to now is something that I brought up in our first meeting. I think there's value in us as leaders talking about our why in the work. And the reason I'm deeply interested in this body, spending a few minutes sharing our personal why, meaning what is it inside of each of us that animates and interests in the work, specifically the work covered by this committee. It helps us develop more understanding of each other. It helps us develop deeper trust. And as a relative outsider to this process, being the newest elected here, I have been struck continually over time by the fact that our amazing school district, top school district in the nation, our amazing city, one of the most innovative, forward-thinking cities in the nation, we have so much in common, and yet we have, over the years, had a history of sometimes not necessarily getting along or not being able to articulate how it is that one set of interests complements another's rather than detracts from. And I'm such a believer in the capacity of humans to bridge differences that I'm deeply interested in us in this committee, figuring out where those linkages are, the areas of common interest, common vision. And it is incredibly clear that we are approaching a new era of city district, city school relationship. The school district's invitation to us to make a proposal about what we might want to do with a segment of the Cumberland lands was a beautiful invitation and much appreciated by the city. The district's recent vote that city employees' children would be permitted to attend the Palo Alto Unified School District is such a beautiful gesture, so important and so valuable really on all sides. It's a lovely example of just how much we can accomplish when we're thinking at that visionary level of what's right for our residents, for our students, for their parents, for all the people who work in the city and the district. So it feels that there's an energy in the air around cooperation and achieving mutually desirable ends. So within that spirit, I want us to each go around and share with each other what I call the why for the work. Ms. Cotton Gaines, can you remind me how much time we set aside for this particular? Because each of us has a long why. I know we could talk for
Mine's okay.
days.
30 seconds.
I don't want you to take 30 seconds.
Well, you'll be disappointed.
I'm inviting you to say more than that, Todd. Okay? I can't force you, but I am making an invitation to try. You and I barely know each other. I'm making an invitation, a request that you say a little bit more about why you got into this in the first place, what matters to you in this work, why you devote so much time and energy and effort to it. So I would like you to go longer than 30 seconds. I'd like you to go for like 2 minutes if you can stand it, because I am deeply interested in what makes you tick around this work. So since you've said you only have 30 seconds, I'm not going to make you go first.
Well, I do have other comments that I'd like to make, addressing the comments that you just made, but I can do them
Okay.
first or later, it doesn't matter.
Okay, well, let me ask this. Are they comments in critique of what I'm saying, or are they comments in support of what I'm saying?
Neither critique nor clarification of what you said, but
Okay,
why don't there's no need for me to go first.
no, no,
I'm
no.
Not asking.
Okay, the purpose of this is to strengthen our relationships and connections with each other and understanding. So it is meant to be entirely positive, and I mean, it is not meant to feel like work or something, you know, that feels like extracting teeth. It is really out of profound respect for the fact that leaders choose to do this work. It is hard work, and there's a reason for each of us. Maybe many reasons, complex set of reasons why we have chosen to incorporate this work into our lives. So that's where I'm coming from. And I've done a lot of talking, so I kind of feel like some of my own why is already coming out just in the fact of requesting something like this. So let me invite either one of my colleagues. I'm also going to invite the staff who are here, not in the clerk role, but in their staff leadership roles, to share their why as well. So with that, who would like to put their voice in the mix? Okay, so let's just take a couple minutes.
Do you want to go?
Because I have comments that don't fully align with what the chair said earlier. I prefer not to go first because I don't want to set a bad vibe on what she's trying to do.
Okay, well, I've long believed that our school district and our city government had in recent decades lost some of the close collaboration that had formerly existed. Really, a lot of that was developed during the periods when the school district was in severely declining enrollment in the late 70s, throughout the 80s, into the early 90s. And at the same time, their financial strength was weakened, and the city had viewed the role of the district in both educating our kids and more broadly to be really essential to the character of Palo Alto and the strength of our community. And so the city had done a number of measures to support the school district that over that period of time. Ones with leasing lands and other things that and payments for those that help support the district financially while allowing retention of a lot of those lands. And so then a lot of those initiatives, including things like picking up crossing guards and a whole myriad of services that the city picked up that were arguably either district or city responsibilities. And a lot of those are covered in the attachment of that outline of kind of these common areas. And I think rooted in that is that the district and the city share really common purposes of serving youth and families in our community. Each have a different focus, but we have those great important overlaps. And so I've been very interested in us working together on a strategic approach to looking at what all those different initiatives and programs are, and how we can collaborate more closely and establish kind of a more comprehensive strategy over that. And I'll say that a lot of the areas of getting to know the importance and the values of these issues amongst us as elected leaders, this doing so in a meeting has a certain function, but outside of meetings is really where those relationships are built. For instance, when Todd and I both ran for election in 2020, we had a joint event, and really the purpose that was around these themes of collaboration. In addition to the outline in our packet, Todd had done a similar one in a spreadsheet that we need to reconcile. But I think we have really similar philosophies around how we should approach our relationship and looking to strengthen collaborations. And I'll say that Shaunak and I have had very similar discussions over several years. And then lastly, just at a high level, I want to say that I'm really grateful how the district over the last maybe 2 years has especially come forward with being deliberate and collaborative with the city, in part because they're enabled to do so because they're in the strongest financial position they've been in a long while, and so they're not constrained in the ways that they to the degree that they were previously. But either way, it's something that the board, I think, deserves a lot of credit for, to really be taking such a positive approach toward our collaborations, and I really appreciate it.
I appreciate that recitation, Pat, really going through kind of the history and where we are. I want you to add, if I may ask, just a couple bits about you as a human in this work. You have chosen to be in public service for a big fraction of your life. And I would love for you to share what that's about for you. Why is it that you have chosen that this work is so important that it's worthy of the amount of time and effort that you spend?
Well, both of my parents were teachers, and my mother was deeply involved in political activism as well. And so the role of public service and public policy has been always what I have believed was a most meaningful calling, and the way that we can serve each other effectively. It's certainly not the only one we have in our community. We have, as elected officials, we get a lot of the attention, but throughout our community, we just have an incredible network of community volunteers who, through faith institutions and sports leagues and scouting and every other endeavor, who parents who devote their time, and people who either were not parents or have adult children continue to do so. And so I think this is a very important focus, but I want to acknowledge that the ways in which people contribute to the community are very broad and very valuable.
Great, thank you. Who wants to go next? Thanks, Ed.
Sure. Let's see. So I'll frame my why, perhaps not directly related to the committee, but more generally, I certainly think it's fair to say I've dedicated my career to public service. Had me doing a little math, I think, for roughly about 35 years since getting out of school. I would note that the evolution that brought me here was from my childhood being really fond of solving puzzles. And that led me to civil engineering school, which then got me more specifically focused on transportation. And so the combination of the analytical work with the really social purpose of much of our transportation work caused me to finally conclude that the greatest puzzles to solve are social ones, and that involve people at both the individual level as well as ultimately at a societal community level. And that's what led me to city management, and really the evolving and growing appreciation for the value of communities and how communities help us both interpersonally, but also ourselves as individuals. And by community, I can think of multiple ways of defining that. Certainly community of place, such as a wonderful place, such as Palo Alto, as well as community of practice, such as the workforce that we have the privilege of engaging with, and using those as examples. Would simply note that every day we're encountering opportunities for greater collaboration across, again, both individuals, organizations, institutions, sectors, as the case may be. And perhaps that's a way to bring it here to this conversation, where one might see a great distinction between the city and school district, but at the same time, you can see the tremendous opportunities for collaboration.
Thanks, Ed. Who's next?
just love these surprises.
Lana doesn't even know she was coming to this meeting.
I'm wondering if she's
Now
made
she's
the right
wondering
choice.
why.
Well, I'll say that my why begins a long time ago when I was in school and had the early realization of the impact that education and the adults within the system can have, both in a positive and negative way on how individuals feel about themselves and what they believe they can accomplish. And it goes back to a personal story that I often share in some of my trainings regarding access and opportunity. I was a pretty precocious young person and was one of the very few students of color in our advanced program at my school. And then during this particular time, it was college season, and at that time where school counselors would call students in to talk about their lives and their career and what they want to do. And I kept seeing all of my classmates getting this little pink slip, to come talk to the counselor. And I couldn't figure out why I wasn't getting a pink slip. And I asked one of my classmates, I was like, what's that pink slip about? I see everybody getting called into the office. And she said, didn't you know it's college week? We're all going in to talk about what colleges we wanted to go to and what our dreams were for the future. And I was like, wow. So I was like, I'm excited because I already know where I want to go and what I want to do. And it wasn't education, by the way, at that time. And I just waited, and that pink slip never came. And finally, I went to the school counselor. I said, I noticed that all of my classmates received a pink slip and I didn't get one. And she said, oh, no, don't worry about it. We're talking about community colleges and workforce next month. So you'll get a pink slip next month. I couldn't figure out, I don't get it. What is it about me that made this individual think that I wasn't in the group that would get a pink slip to go talk about college? And I talked to my dad about it. And of course, dad was dad and, got a little bit upset. But I started to think about the power that just that message had on me as an individual, and how many other individuals could potentially be impacted by the belief systems of other people who don't have an understanding of the capacities of every individual and every human being in the world. So I began to think, how many people like me didn't get a pink slip? So I built my career around ensuring that every kid had an opportunity and an access to that pink slip. So I live my life and do my work with that lens, ensuring that we intentionally break down barriers to learning and to opportunities that may not necessarily be there, and move away from the assumption that all people have the tools they need and have the grit they need to succeed. All they do is have to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and make it happen. And I've focused a lot of my work on making sure that we're surfacing the barriers that prevent students from even believing, humans from even believing that they can achieve to their highest potential. So I will say my why is about acknowledging first that everyone doesn't inherently have that pink slip, and ensuring that we're creating systems and processes and policies that ensure that that pink slip gets in the hands of every student.
Thanks, Lana. Who's next?
I'll go. It's always hard to follow Lana
It is.
Yeah.
in life. Should have known that. My why overall, I like to say I've been doing some kind of volunteer work since I was about 3 years old. My mother worked for a nonprofit in my community of Flint, Michigan, and really instilled in us the need to help others and to give back. And so that's kind of been my MO for a really long time. By the time I graduated high school, I actually didn't have a job, but I think I had about 10,000 more volunteer hours than the next closest person in volunteer hours. It was quite ridiculous at the end of the day when you think about it. But I've done a ton of programs over my life with really trying to create opportunities where there weren't opportunities for students that look like me, that are coming from communities that aren't expected to produce scholars and things like that. And so I just noticed there's a difference for my existence in a community like Flint versus the communities that were neighboring my community that had a lot more opportunity and access. So it's interesting to bring that perspective to all the work I do, whether it's in a particular space like that or elsewhere. And also just being the super government nerd that I am. Similar, I think, to Ed's experience of just realizing that the systems that we create have a really big impact on the outcomes that people experience. And so even if it's down to the nitty gritty of the words of the policies that we follow, the actual community facing policies or how we operate internally, just realizing that they all have a great impact of the day-to-day experience of people in the community and wanting to continue to help and give back.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Do you want to go, Todd? Or should?
I'd love to hear yours.
Okay. I sense that you might want to have the last word, so I'm going to.
No, not-
Okay.
No, if you prefer,
Okay,
either way.
no, I'm good. I root for the underdog. I always have. And I think that's in part because of my folks who were in public service. My dad was a public health doctor who helped eradicate smallpox in the 1960s. And so I came into this life with a dad whose work was as a physician about healing populations of people. And I saw the joy that he felt in that, in those endeavors. My mother was a school teacher and helped kids, particularly in science. Her passion is teaching chemistry, and she got a PhD in science education to help chemistry teachers become more effective at teaching chemistry, because she really believes every child can be brought forth through the magic of chemistry. Sadly, I was not brought forth through the magic of chemistry. I was more of a social studies kid, but looking at mom, the school teacher, and dad, the public health doc, I was just raised in a family with parents devoted to bringing opportunity for greater healthfulness, a better life, bringing that opportunity to others. I root for the underdog, I think because of what I saw my parents be about, but also because I've had some similar experiences to what Lana and Chantal and perhaps others in this room have experienced around not being seen in my capability, and having to really push and say, no. I am more capable than you might expect someone who looks like me to be. And I think that gave me a lot of compassion for any human who's, for whatever reason, not deemed to be within the box that society has decided is the right box. I'm really interested in all of us making it. I'm sort of a Mario Cuomo Democrat in that, I remember watching him in the 1984, I think, or 1980, I can't remember, the Democratic National Convention of decades ago. He described Democrats as being this party that wants to be sure that that it's not about one person winning the race, it's about making sure that everybody gets there. And that really just sort of stuck with me. And I think it animates my work, it animates my interest in the work that I'm doing now as a city leader. What can we do with the vast resources we have and the vast intellect and innovation, problem-solving capacity and heart and hope? What can we do to make sure that everybody makes it? So yeah, I think that's my why. Thank you.
Okay. I ran for school board to help the school district be more effective at achieving its goals. That was it. And wasn't sure what the goals would be and wasn't sure what the problems were that needed to be solved, but that was why I did it. I'd like to gently remind our colleagues on the council, I think the characterization of current, recent past, distant past relationship between the board and the district and the city, or the city council and the school board, is I don't find those characterizations very helpful. I think they often, I have never heard a board member in public, a school board member in public or in private, make characterizations about the city's position or the way the city is behaved or what the city should do. And it's not because I speaking for myself, certainly, it's not because we don't have opinions on those things. It's because I think we don't find it particularly helpful to publicly share those characterizations or even much in private. I hope we have a good working relationship. I've done everything I can do, everything I can think to do to try to improve and make constructive our relationship with the city on Carverly and with other issues. But it wears thin hearing critiques of the school board, both my colleagues in the past and our group in the present. So I'd urge you to not promote that narrative. And if you want to talk about what actually has happened and what some of the other views are, I can do that offline. But I just don't, I don't like the narrative that the school board was bad and the school district was self-serving and now somehow we're better. I don't think that's right. I don't think that's constructive. So I gently remind you and hope you'll take that to heart.
Todd, I certainly take it to heart. Want to clarify that whatever I said, I was really trying to articulate on both sides. There seems to be a spirit of greater cooperation or, greater visioning of the future than we've seen in a while. And I regard that as being an all sides thing, not a, I didn't mean it as a critique of the district. So just to clarify where I'm coming from.
But just to clarify, I mean, by saying it's better now implies that somehow people were deficient in the past.
Yeah.
I don't know if that applies
Yeah.
to boards that I was on or boards
Yeah.
my prior colleagues were on.
Yeah.
Again,
Okay.
whether you believe that or not,
Yeah.
I
hear you. I hear their sensitivity there.
there's a when did you stop beating your wife
Oh.
component to that. and
I see.
It's just not appreciated.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that clarity. It's certainly, I'm not intending it as a when did you stop beating your wife, but rather, isn't it exciting when two great organizations can manage to do great stuff together? It is hard to talk about new things that are good without implying that the past was bad, but I appreciate the pushback and the sensitivity is really evident. And it's evident in the hearts and minds of many. And I frankly think that the sensitivities around the ways we have talked about each other or not talked about each other, as the case may be, in public, impacts our ability to work together. So I'm glad you're airing that. I also want to say, you said you wanted to help the school district be more effective at meeting its goals. And the purpose of this exercise is to ask, why is that something that matters to you? Can you share with us something about your?
I don't have that more to add.
Okay. Is that because it feels that I'm asking too personal a question or it's not, you don't see its relevance?
I don't have anything to contribute on this item.
Okay. All right. Well, I thank everyone for going through this exercise. And I want to note some of the similarities that I heard, at least. I heard about parents being influencers. And I heard about being a child fond of solving puzzles. The greatest puzzles to solve are the social ones, the evolving value of community. I heard about the impact that adults in the system can have on children coming up in the system, positive and negative. I heard about trying to create opportunity for those who are not expected to be the recipients of that opportunity and the value of government. I spoke of rooting for the underdog. And I heard about wanting to help the organization, the district, be effective at meeting its goals. I think there's a lot of commonality here, which is fantastic. And it's also great to know why folks are in this work. All right, well, let's move on from this item and move to city and district reports. And I'll invite our friends from the district to go first in whichever order you'd like.
And just a reminder to you, Chair, you said about 10 to 12 minutes for both the city and the district was your goal for this item.
Okay. So each 10 to 12 minutes each. So look at your colleagues and figure out, and also we need to allow time for questions from the body, okay? And the public.
I have very little. We've had one school board meeting since since the last meeting of this body, and there was nothing on the agenda that I can recall that was that that was of note to the city school liaison committee. I think Lon's nodding. I think she agrees. So I don't really have anything to report. Do you have anything additional?
I will just add that we are at that time of year where we are planning for next year and trying to figure out, where our closest priorities are in terms of where we're investing most of our time regarding planning. So you've probably heard of the PAUSD promise, which came back up. There were some slight revisions to the focus of the promise. As you know, there were 5 priority areas. And one of those areas was healthy attendance. And we decided that we can incorporate that in part of our SWIFT plan, which is our equity plan. And we've replaced that with another term, which is innovation and agility, which I think will give us a lot of opportunity to focus on how do we, as we're working on this equity work, how do we stretch as well, become, that destination district that's doing really amazing things. We are already, but we always see some opportunity for growth in that area. Along with that, the SWIFT plan, which is our system-wide integrated framework for transformation, aka our equity plan, we've started to look at whether the 5 goals we've identified in that particular area really hits on those things that are the biggest threat to inequity. So one of the things we felt as a team that we may have left out in that conversation is student, family, and community engagement and partnership. And also district operations. So we are right now working on tweaking a few goals that will really lend itself to identifying what's happening within the system that really is a threat to the inequities that are kind of built within the system. And then how we can engage our other partners, from our students to our families to community agencies to better address some of the needs that we're seeing with our families. Lots of planning going on there. Probably the most exciting thing right now is that we have expanded our focus on mental health to include our staff as well. I can't remember if I mentioned that last time. So we have actually in the process of hiring an individual specifically for our staff to be on site at a moment's notice if a staff member is experiencing some stress and anxiety or having a tough time. They now have someone that they can go to immediately and privately to get some support in that particular area. In addition to that, we're expanding our mental health supports for students across the board. We didn't feel like we needed to have a limit on when students can access care. So our TBH model, which is a telehealth service, allows students without any conversation from a staff member 24/7 can seek out support from a health therapist to get coaching or just have a discussion or get one-on-one individualized care. So we're really proud of the mental health supports we're building in for both our students and our staff.
Thank you. Any questions for the school district? Okay. Would you like to share?
We usually have our staff go first and then.
Okay.
Sure. All right, on behalf of staff, just a couple quick updates. The first is, as Mr. Horowitz referenced, Mr. Shikata said we'll be bringing an item related to Coverly to City Council soon. Our tentative date for a public study session is May 15th, so it's a little sooner than you were anticipating. And we are working on the staff report, so that is tentative as of this very second. But we are actively working on that to get all the materials together. The other item we wanted to acknowledge is the board action that took place this Tuesday related to city employees, full-time employees, students being able to attend PAUSD schools. So we're appreciative of the district action that took place, and we are going to be meeting, I believe, next week with Dr. Austin and Ms. Amy Love to start ironing out some of those details of what that looks like and to further shop that information to our city employees here at the city organization. So just wanted to share that appreciation, as well as note that there are a lot of steps to get work done between now and the fall, which is when we're hoping to make that opportunity first available to our employees. So those are the top two. Thank you.
Madam Chair, could I just comment briefly?
Please.
I did just want to clarify, I didn't mention that, not because I don't think it's important and worth mentioning. I obviously do, but it was passed on our consent calendar on a second read and we received no discussion. We had discussed it in the prior meeting. So, but very happy to acknowledge that that we're moving down that path.
Well, I'll just add a few items that I think might be of interest to the district. One is that we had I think it's actually trying to remember a study session or action item on what was called Trust Program, which is a new program that we received a grant on that sends vans with crisis intervention specialists for intoxicated and mentally ill and disoriented community members that are a non-law enforcement group as an alternative to law enforcement response to those needs. It complements a program that we actually have on hold at the moment due to a staffing shortage, but the PERT program, which sends a clinician out with a public safety officer in response to police calls that are appear to have a mental health component to them. And these are complementary programs and very innovative and they're part of our initiative to not only de-escalate needs in the community by community members that otherwise and traditionally might have had law enforcement responses, but to also expand the services that we have. And then we also had a strong discussion over the 2023 work plan with a particular focus on all the various many work plan elements that our city staff is pursuing that are aligned with our council priorities. We didn't discuss the additional initiatives they have that are outside of those priorities, but just a reminder, the priorities are economic recovery and transition, housing with a focus on affordability, and climate protection and adaptation. And then lastly, public safety and public health. And within the public health, there is a particular call out for the last 2 years of focusing on how we can help address the needs of youth who had their mental health stress through the 2 years of the pandemic. And I would say that that's the area that we're still struggling the most on how to have initiatives that will really further that objective. But we're putting more focus on that. Lastly, we just had an annual update on all of our, adoption of all of our changes to our utility rates. And as one of the biggest utility consumers in the city, the school district has a vested interest in that. And we fortuitously had a settlement of a lawsuit that brought $26 million to the city utilities that had been lingering out there for years. And that forestalled some really more difficult choices we would have had if not for that settlement and those funds, because the city basically had almost almost all increases to utilities during the two primary pandemic years, despite significant cost increases. And in doing so, depleted our reserves. And we were faced with a situation of having potentially significant utility increases on top of what we had was uncontrollable and unforeseen, huge spikes in natural gas costs that were passed on to all of our customers, and a significant increase in our electric costs because of reduced hydroelectric power from the 3-year drought. So in the end, we were able to adopt moderate increases, but they still matter, and that's where we are in that. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll just add, our Palo Alto Youth Council, an amazing set of kids, most of whom attend school in the district, put on a mental health fair at Mitchell Park last weekend, and tomorrow are doing an Earth Day effort. And I'm continually struck when I listen to the youth of this city by the strength of their voice, the courage of their convictions. They really are an extraordinary group of people. And when it comes to climate in particular, I know that whenever they speak up at one of our meetings, they speak with a clarity and a forcefulness that is undeniable. And it makes sense because for them, what's happening to the climate is an existential threat in ways that are just, harder for us, the older we are, to really appreciate in our bones. For our kids, they know that, it is imperative that we mitigate the change that's underway and ensure that the planet is livable. So I just want to mention that for those who don't know, it is happening tomorrow. I don't know, I don't have the time in front of me. I don't know if anyone here's got the 2 p.m.
Believe so. I'll double check.
Okay, and where? Here
City Hall.
at City Hall Plaza. Yeah. I think when we're looking for for the obvious linkages between city and the district, the leadership efforts of our kids are something I know we're all proud of. So I just want to mention that. All right. My mask, I'm sorry. I've come down with a little something. Don't worry, it's not COVID. I've tested, but in the months I have not been wearing a mask, I have forgotten how cumbersome it is to get this thing over my ears.
Do you want to take a break?
No, I'm good. Thank you. All right. Do we take public comments on these reports now? Is that what happens next? Can I invite public comment?
Chair, we have no request to speak.
Okay.
Madam Chair, could I ask?
Yes.
Request a short break because I want to go get a cup of coffee and that will break our quorum.
Okay,
But
yes,
it will take,
please
as long as the Keurig machine.
go nourish yourself.
Okay, thank you.
And let's turn now to item E. This is the city schools collaborations discussion. In some ways, this is the topic that is the very reason for this committee's existence. we pulled together some documents, just for reference. One is our charge, the purpose statement behind the existence of the committee, which, Todd had raised as an issue. Excuse me, that's my phone. Why does this committee exist? Should this committee exist? Is the committee poised to be purposeful and effective? So that document on the, sort of why this was created and what the committee is meant to be able to do is here as an attachment. We also have this wonderful document created a couple years back that lists myriad ways in which the city and district might collaborate, or the topics that might overlap. I know this was co-created by folks on the district side and folks on the city side. I know that I think, Pat, you alluded to Todd having pulled together a document of potential collaborations. And, I think what I want to do is kind of ask us in the present context, given where we are in all things, the various lists and matrices that have been created, I'd like to have a conversation about what's possible, what do we want, what's obvious, what are the really, hard things we might want to collaborate on if we had the right set of folks in the room. And the other end of the spectrum, what's the low-hanging fruit around ways in which we might collaborate even more effectively than we currently are? I'd just love to throw that question open to my colleagues and see what comes to mind.
Well, I'll just say that that the document was actually an attempt to capture not principally the areas that we might collaborate on, but where we actually have existing either ways in which one of our bodies provides or is the lead on a service that supports the aims of both bodies or vice versa. And as a framework to try to not look at these on just piecemeal basis, but start looking at them more comprehensively. And out of that, potentially leading to discussions on ways that we could either strengthen or more clearly define our respective roles, or simply look for gaps that might become more apparent as a result. I think that the exciting opportunity we have to finally kind of break through on Coverly is probably the most substantive thing that we have going on right now. And that's certainly been at the forefront, but the possibility that we might be able to really come up with a path forward on land that then leads to the opportunity for the city to be able to pursue whatever it decides it wants to do on a community center basis is a big issue that we all are aware of. So that's kind of my framing of it.
Todd,
Nothing to
nothing
add.
to add? Besides Coverly, when you talk about, the existing collaborations and opportunities to strengthen and more clearly define, is there anything else that comes when you look at the list or the list that Todd's pulled together? Kind of what's next besides Coverly, or what's on a different scale? Coverly's an enormous thing. What are the other things that we've got going on that are effective collaborations that we could strengthen and more clearly define and maybe look for gaps around?
Well, we have a lot of things that are ongoing between our staffs that are various negotiations and collaborations from field space to issues around middle school athletics and partnering programs, issues of how do we, even in the future, if we have different school sites needing crossing guards, how are those addressed? The whole myriad that are in there, a lot of those are ongoing and many less active. Ed, I don't know if you have any comments on some of the things that are just ongoing at this time.
Sure, I think that's a good characterization, that we have a number of touch points effectively between our staff on projects perhaps that either agencies are taking on any particular front. As we think about going forward, I know one issue that has been of discussion, certainly on the city side and perhaps on the districts as well, is how our planning for growth and housing in particular would interface and affect district needs and vice versa. So, I certainly see that as a large issue ahead of us. The specific role that this committee could play in that, perhaps less clear, but perhaps once as we go through our next round and finalization of the city's housing element, be a good time to revisit that topic and consider roles and connections going forward.
Madam Chair, may I speak?
Please.
I think a more appropriate framing, but the framing that there might be deficits in the things that we collaborate on, or deficits in the way that of either specific items or items that aren't included. I don't perceive that as an issue. I think it may give the impression that there's insufficient collaboration. There's tons of collaboration between the city and the district on a wide range of issues. It has been for a long time. I know the city staff and the district staff meet. I don't even know how often they meet. They meet so often.
At least monthly.
And that there's a strong relationship between the staffs, which frankly is the most important thing, since the staff does virtually all the work. The issue that I see as more relevant for the policymaking bodies is making sure there's a framework in which these myriad things exist that feels fair and appropriately shared between the bodies. And what we heard just in this meeting, and we hear from I've heard from past city council people as well, a narrative that somehow that the school district, is supported by the city. Well, I'll add it. Sorry to do this to you, but I did it the other day at the meeting. It's like, there were times in fact, in this very body, not too many years ago, where city manager Chicata would show up with his spreadsheet of all the items, tabulating all the money that was spent by the city on things that are youth related or district related, and implying that somehow, we should be, that somehow this wasn't balanced, or I'm not sure what exactly was implying, but the spreadsheets were waived with dollar amounts on them. And I think to a certain extent, there's validity to that. I mean, at the end of the day, we are two government agencies that serve an overlapping constituency and exist in an overlapping geographic body. And, our commitment is to serve K through 12 students, or now TK through 12 students. And your commitment is to serve everybody. And there are areas in which, and I think some of the service that you guys provide are to youth and families that also are people that we serve. And there are areas where there's a jump ball in terms of who should do what. A couple were mentioned in this meeting, like middle school sports or crossing guards, or safe route to school activities, and the list can go on and on. And different communities, or early childhood childcare, another very big one. And there have been various collaborations between the city and the school district in the past on these. And if you look up and down the peninsula, if you look around the state or around the country, you see all kinds of different arrangements between cities and school districts in terms of how they arrange these things. There are no right ways. There are no ways that this is the way it's supposed to be. Oh, city, school districts should provide crossing guards. No, cities are responsible for safe routes to school. They're your streets. It's who does middle school sports? I mean, on the peninsula alone, there are school districts that do it. There are nonprofits that do it. There are cities that do it. There is no one right way that these things are supposed to be done. So what's been absent in my experience over the last several years and my role as a trustee is any framework for discussing those issues. They seem to come up one at a time. One will become a hotspot for whatever reason. Additional money needs to be spent, or somebody's budget is under pressure and they're looking for cuts, or somebody in the community will say something more should be done on this, and the fingers get whipped out and saying, "Oh no, that should be you. Oh no, that's you," and all those things are all going to happen. I mean, that's just life. The thing that's missing is some framework by which the city and the school discuss those, not in a whack-a-mole fashion. That's like, oh my God, what are we going to do about crossing guards this year? But more in a holistic fashion. And there aren't many models for how that gets done. I think I'm not sure what you shared, Pat, but this is something I did some research on maybe 4 or 5 years pre-pandemic. I did some research on. But there are some models that exist about how cities and school districts arrange their affairs in some totality, so they have regular, there's some regular negotiation on the full set of issues, and it helps reset. It helps things from getting so far out of balance in one area or another that people get upset. It creates a regular forum for discussing the totality of the issues. Now, this comes with costs. It's certainly nice to not have to discuss something for 10 years at a time. I don't think any of us want to have. No one would relish the regular discussion of how to allocate middle school sports, or who should be in charge of crossing guards, or how much should be paid for X, Y, and Z. I mean, those are not fun discussions, and we all have better things to do. But the problem is, if you don't discuss them for a decade or two, people, things get out of whack, and all of a sudden, this looks obviously wrong. Why does the school district cutting off this vendor that we helped create 20 years ago? Don't they understand how important this is, or where it came from, or what the context is? And the answer is they don't. Literally every person who was involved in it 20 years ago is gone. And the new people come in and look at it and say, I don't think that's the right way to do it. But there is no forum to ever have that discussion. So, I think the thing that would be useful for this group, and as I said at I think the first meeting, I'm not sure this group is actually the most useful way to go about this. The biggest problem being that we're a Brown Act body, which means that if any three of us discuss an issue outside these public meetings, that can happen. As opposed to three city council members and 2 school board committees not on this committee. You can get together anytime they want and discuss it. So in detail, sitting around a table. So I'm not sure that this is the best way to go about this, and how to include staff in a certain way. It's hard to include staff in sessions like this. But staff's a vital part of any discussion we'd have about that. So, but I think, if I had my druthers, it would be useful to think about how to move towards some kind of framework where those issues got regularly discussed. And not every year, oh God forbid, but maybe every 4 or 5 years. And everybody knew that, okay, well, this feels out of whack, put this in the bullpen. And when we have the regular discussion in 2.5 years' time, whatever it is, then that's when that issue is going to get discussed. And we all know, and we don't have to worry about it's going to get forgotten or whatever, because we know there's going to be a meeting in 2.5 years that's going to discuss this very, very thing. I don't know if other people have models. So I mean, Pat, I know you in particular work with agencies all up and down the peninsula. A lot of these multi-jurisdiction agencies, I'm sure this kind of stuff comes up all the time. But anyway, that was the thought I had, because I actually think on the ground, collaboration between the city and the school district is great. I mean, could it be better? I'm sure it could. Has it been better or worse in the past? I'm sure both of those things. But I think it's pretty darn good. I mean, if I thought there were real deficiencies, I'd work on it. But I don't see things that I think are really deficient. But I do think that we, without, it requires more constant, things have the tendency to get out of whack, and there's no forum to resolve those issues. And that can lead to blow-ups that would be disruptive for all of us. So anyway, I've talked for a long time.
Please.
Todd mentioned something that I've been thinking about as I sat in on the last two meetings here, which was, to what extent is the capacity in this particular body or group to build and sustain any positive change. And when Todd mentioned framework, that's one of the first things that came to mind in terms of, are we operating under a framework that identifies shared goals, shared outcomes, a shared vision for what we want to accomplish in this group. And it reminded me of a resource that may be worth checking out, which is through, I forgot the university, but it's called the Collaboration Framework. And it's about addressing community capacity and how you can formulate these collaborative groups to really address issues at various system and institution levels across the community. So to Todd's point, I think having a framework for that and the discussion will be a great way for us to really hone in on what we're really trying to accomplish and potentially make the discussions and decisions coming out of this particular body more meaningful and connected to what the community is saying our needs. So that collaborative framework says we reach out to the community first to try to identify where the problems of practice are that we want to address. And there's a body that actually looks across the community at various institutions to say, all right, who has the capacity and what kind of collaboration is necessary to reach the outcomes that we're looking for. So that was the first thing that came to mind. And the second thing, that your first question was about what things we could potentially partner on together. And I started to think about some of those themes that thread through all of the partnerships that we have. And a lot of them are kind of grounded in social justice, resource justice, environmental justice. And so potentially identifying an area where we can focus our attention on as a theme and branch out to say, we want to make sure that we can address these concerns that we're seeing across our community so that everyone has equal access and opportunity, and not just for those marginalized groups, but for our entire community. Because if we define and redefine equity as everyone has the opportunity to get what they need to thrive and keep that as a core question, then we're asking, I think, these critical questions about what needs to happen for our community members to feel like everyone has that opportunity to thrive.
Well, I want to thank both of you for what you've just offered. And actually, Todd, I think it would be wonderful if at our May meeting, if you would present on this potential framework. It sounds like you've done a ton of thinking on it. I don't know how you alluded to it having been some years ago when you developed it. Every time I look at you, that's when the mask comes off. My face is like a strange proportion. But I'd certainly love to see it. I think we would all benefit from seeing all of this thinking that you've done. And so.
Unfortunately, I won't be able to attend. So
Okay. All right. June?
I haven't looked on the calendar, but I imagine.
Okay. And then Lana, I think this collaboration framework that you're alluding to sounds like an intriguing way to frame how we get to themes that we might jointly agree are matter and instructive. What I wanted to share is, for me, it's kids' mental health. And, to Todd's point about policy, which is of course our purpose, there are some ways in which we can legislate, improving mental health for kids. We can do things here and there to make a kid's life better, make city and school life better for kids. But I actually think it's in the water, it's in the air, it's how we treat kids, how we talk about kids, how we engage kids. And that would be my highest. I mean, if Coverly is the physical manifestation of a great collaboration, I think coming up with a commitment to a deep and abiding interest in what does it feel like to be a child in Palo Alto, whether you're attending the Palo Alto Unified or attending a different school but live here, what does it feel like to be a child? And I've worked with other communities that have dared to ask that question in their community. And I think it's daring to ask it, and it requires, then the commitment to listen and act upon it. And so I would be really excited about a joint collaboration around that. I don't have a model in mind. I think it's a series of conversations, obviously centering youth. But I will do some more thinking on that and maybe bring forward a proposal or a concept that we can discuss and see if there's any interest in that.
Well, let me first touch on that last issue. We actually have a framework and an entity that was intended to be that that body that would span all of the issues related to youth mental health in our community, both city initiatives, school initiatives, and then all the myriad of great community partners, and that's Project Safety Net. But it had started off as a body that really was involving both the district and the city very strongly. And then my best observation is, as the district over a number of years began a whole series of initiatives to address those issues within the schools, the role of Project Safety Net was less central to how the school district was addressing those issues. I don't know how to best either resurrect or reconcile those efforts, but the initiatives that the school district has in that arena today compared to 10 years ago are strikingly just more comprehensive. But that's the existing body that is designed for that broad community collaboration, and whether it's in the same kind of balance that it was when in its first years, whether that should be the participation levels going forward is a separate question. But I think we do have to be careful about creating new entities when we have one by design, whether we want to look at how it can more effectively address some of the issues we're raising is a separate question from whether we should be creating something new.
Yeah, I am not trying to create something new. I totally agree that Project Safety Net is meant to be the home and should be the home. I'm trying to ask us as leaders, what might we be willing to do to be a part of that conversation, to help spur an additional, a new conversation about these issues in the current moment. when I ask the question, what does it feel like to be a kid here? I don't mean to narrow it to mental health. I mean, to broaden it to, you know, what does it feel like to be a child in Palo Alto and in the Palo Alto Unified? With mental health being a component of that, but I think the question is actually a little bigger, which is why I didn't initially situate this within Project Safety Net.
Madam Chair, can I
Yes,
add something on that?
please.
I don't speak for the school board or for the district in this body. I mean, I can only speak when authorized, and we haven't discussed it, obviously. But I think the general tenor of the district, we have a lot going on. We have a lot going on a lot of different fronts. Mental health is, you know, we have a huge, we probably spend more per student on mental health than any district in California. And have significantly increased our, we've moved from vendor-based to employee-based. We've made huge efforts and commitments, but that's in that one area. I'd say in general, we try to do everything that we think is important to help create a successful environment for our students and help our students achieve success. One of the things we don't do, in order to further that, we are very selective. And I think our natural reflex is negative toward taking the lead in initiative or getting heavily involved in initiatives outside our scope. And, you know, that might be good or bad. You could argue that, oh, no, the school district should be a leader on multi-agency things or should participate more in multi-agency. But just the factual truth is that our reflex has been, we get more done when we focus on our stuff, on our own stuff, and we got lots of stuff to do. So I just want to be careful about when we talk about, you know, multi-stakeholder, like Project Safety Net's a good example, right? I think your characterization was a fair one. I think Project Safety Net got out of the gates and did a lot of stuff when we were flat-footed, but we made a multi-year, you know, very significant and ongoing commitment to mental health for the kids in our schools that only continues to grow. And so now I think it was funny because I don't remember if you were on this board when there was a time when Project Safety Net came and presented. I don't, you probably know it's not a because you're not nodding. When I told them, it's like, how are the schools involved? And the answer was almost not at all. And it's like, well, you should go, oh, the person that they had been working with had left the district and they hadn't even reestablished a new relationship with that person's replacement. And there was nobody from the board who knew anything about Project Safety Net. And we had basically been, you know, they were kind of going on without us. We were proceeding in parallel. And I said, you know, you guys really got to go reach out to us because, you know, we're doing a lot, but we're focused on our stuff, right? We're not looking over to see what you're doing. We're very focused on our stuff. So I think that the district's happy to participate in initiatives that the city leads or that others lead where we have a useful role to play. Obviously, we touch a lot of families and we have a lot of resources, but our first instinct is to focus. We got our hands full. We got a lot of stuff that we work on, and we are not looking outside of our lanes to find new things to work on. So that's not meant to be negative. It's just meant to be a characterization of our attitude.
Yeah, and you know, as I stated, I really acknowledge the very strong progress in programs that the district now has in this arena. And I was on this body 2 years ago when there was a Project Safety Net update, and I'm not sure if it's the same one that you're referring to. I think it's preceding that. I think this is a two-way street there, and it's not just an issue of if the district essentially through change in personnel or different things largely disengaged from Project Safety Net. I don't think the onus is wholly on Project Safety Net to resolve that. I think it's both bodies. And that I think that there's within your organization, you've defined a whole bunch of really important programs that you've been pursuing and putting tremendous resources to. And I think that really replaced many of the things that were in the early years of Project Safety Net. Advocacy, frankly, that the school district would do more in those areas. But I don't think that's the totality of what could be done through collaboration. I don't think our lanes are so narrow and defined. And that the only way that we actually start exploring, including what I referred to earlier about looking at, are there gaps, is with an open mind and looking at that, as opposed to a mindset that because the district has done an incredible amount in this area, they must have covered everything that is relevant. And I think some of what's relevant are those ways in which there aren't clear demarcations in those lanes. And only through that discussion do we say, oh, yeah, I guess so. Or no, clearly, we don't think that that is a role of the district or a role of the city or vice versa. So I think that as we look at kind of these major categories of where we might have collaboration, that's one that might have its own set of people who would sit down together and just try to look strategically and say, okay, have we got all the bases covered? And if so, great. But are there other ways that maybe there are gaps or ways that we genuinely should be collaborating that we haven't been? And I think it's only through that exploration that we'll have those answers, as opposed to a premise that says we got our lanes. And I don't know the answer to that. I know numerous examples from the past where and I do want to clarify too that Project Safety Net had all the way upstream in definitions of youth mental health and youth well-being to look more broadly at really how we have youth voice in the community and how we have a more broad, healthy environment for youth. And so I think that there are both opportunities and even lessons from things that were done in the past that maybe have lapsed because the focus went into new, very valid areas. So I think there's an important discussion to be had there that should probably be one discussion focused on that subject. And once again, I say that with having been someone who was involved in that at the outset and had worked with people who became board members who took on this as a real focus area. And I've been an admirer of the achievements that have occurred within the district. And so anyway, that's the framework I put on that.
Thank you, Pat. I want to note that we are at 10 o'clock. I want to know procedurally if we have anybody who's trying to comment on any of this. Then,
Chair, we do have one request to speak.
okay, let's hear from that member of the public, please.
I'll be brief too.
Unlike Mr. Burton,
I'm sorry.
unlike Mr. Burton.
Oh, okay. No, I wanted to make two just comments on this particular item. One, a general comment is I'm very supportive of committees. And so I hope this committee stays intact. I don't want to see it go away. As far as city council goes, I believe meetings are too long and there should be more committee meetings and then these things should go on the consent calendar. So that's my first general comment about committees. The second comment, which we didn't hear much about today or heard nothing about, but I did listen to the school board meeting on Tuesday night. And enrollment is a big issue for the school board, and a lot's going to depend upon housing. So there's a lot of collaboration that's going to go on between the housing element and the school board. So I want to share that with you.
Thank you very much. Okay, in terms of future business, is there any item that members would like to see put on a future agenda? Other than what's come up in this meeting? Okay. Then I will